Oh, yes. Yes, 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 yes. Look at that. Look at that. Oh, I love it when they preen. I love it. Oh, so good. So, so, so good. Oh, oh, even the feet are beautiful. Even the feet. Oh, no. Oh, it's going to stretch. Oh, goodness me. That is absolutely outstanding. Welcome to Springwatch. Hello and welcome to Springwatch 2024. It's week 2 coming to you from the beautiful RSPB Reserve down here at Arn. Now last week was packed with drama, packed with new science. I've got to say this week we've got more coming up, including some incredible birds. Look at these, red-throated red-throated diver, yeah. Here's a dormouse, not a normouse. And here's a beaver, not a weaver. Oh, goodness me, so good. We've got lots coming up.
It started well. It is indeed week 2, so I know you're keen to find out what's happened to our nests over the weekend, so let's go straight to some of them live. Here we go, here are some of our live nests. What have we got, Chris?
Oh, look at the peregrine, come on, second chance. Look at it scratching. I love it when they scratch too. It's just so good.
I love the texture on the castle behind
What are you
it.
looking at the texture of the castle for? Look at the
bird with beautiful texture. I went to that castle at the weekend, tried to see the peregrine. Absolutely gorgeous place. But as Chris said, you know, we've had some drama, obviously, last week. We had some of our nests that were predated. We had some that had fledged successfully. And we've got some new nests for you this week. And before I show you, I'll give you a clue. It's a bird that's iconic to this heathland here in Arn. If you know it, shout it out. Of course, it's the Dartford warbler. So let's have a look at the nest live right now. There's the nest. The little chicks are hunkering down. So let's take a look at the adult bird. What a handsome bird with that red ring around the eye and that chestnutty red chest.
Oh, peregrine, is
it? This is still gorgeous. This is it, feeding those little chicks yesterday. 3 chicks, just 9 days old. And they nest right down in the gorse, quite low down, just under 60 centimetres. As it flew out, you could see that it's really buried right down in the heather. So, as I say, they've been feeding well. There were just 2 pairs in the 1960s, and because of good management here at Arn, they built those pairs up to about 90. But look at this, Chris. This was yesterday.
I know.
Today, I think. Sorry, today. And look how much they're grown.
They're growing so quickly.
I mean, that's incredible in just 24 hours. I've got high hopes for this nest, you know, because, you know, they don't do well in really cold, severe winters. Numbers drop dramatically, but they can recover very quickly because they have numerous broods and they have a very high survival rate of chicks. So as I say, I'm feeling very positive about this nest. I'm also feeling positive because there are, as I say, now 90 pairs here at Arn. So there are lots of nests. But look at this particular nest because it's unusual. Look at that rusty red inside. If we compare that to our nest that we've got cameras on, you can see a totally different colour and it's lined with grass. So what exactly is that redness in the nest?
The answer is beneath my feet,
Look
quite
at that,
literally. Eh? Look at this.
Just so happens.
Here is that redness. This is what the Dartfords have been using to line their nest with. It's a plant called dodder. You can just see those red threads there. It's an obligate parasite, produces no chlorophyll, can't photosynthesize, needs to get all of its nutrients from its host, which in this case is heather, but it will also go onto gorse. And if you look at this image here, you can see that those threads wrap themselves around the heather. And here you can see that these little nodules, they're called horstoria, and they actually fuse with the stem of the heather, and it's through those that they extract all of the moisture and nutrients that they need. Sometimes it grows in small patches like this, sometimes over a much bigger area, and it's known as witch's hair. And it was said in the past that if you mixed it with the blood of a black dog, it would prevent you from being susceptible to the spirits of enchantment.
Does it work?
I don't know. I've got black dogs. I don't want to see any of their blood mixed with this. And I would rather like to experience the spirits of enchantment.
Works well as lining, though, doesn't it? It's a nice lining.
It is indeed. But I tell you what, spirits of enchantment, we can go to the spirit of the wood now. Let's go live to our goshawk's nest. Oh, look at that. Oh, so good. It's a raptor fest, isn't it? Started strong with the peregrine and now we've got the goshawk there feeding those young. Aren't they superb? Truly superb. So ferocious. Look at the eye. Look at the eye. The eye means only one thing. When you see it, you've had it. So good. Now, we started watching these 9 days ago. Look at the difference in those chicks. This was them 9 days ago. None of the feathers visible. Much smaller, covered in that white, fluffy down coat. And also look at the female. She's doing all of the feeding. That's her now on the right. That's a female that we were watching very close to this nest last year. We think it's the same female. She's molted into our adult plumage, and we've looked very closely and we think it's the same bird. Nest is quite high up, 24 metres in one of these spindly pine trees. So during the course of the week, when the wind blows, as you can see, it's a rocky ride for these young goshawks. We also noticed the birds doing this. Now, we've seen goshawk before, and like a few other birds, they will bring aromatic plants to their nest. It's thought that it reduces the chances of bacteria infecting the young. It could be reducing the parasite load in the nest. But we've never seen the birds actually collecting it before. But here she's going out, snapping off all of this fresh greenery and then bringing it back to the nest. As I say, there are a number of theories as to why these birds might be doing this. The general one, because it's seen in other birds, even blue tits will do it. Blue tits will bring things like mint or catmint back to their nest, and scientists have looked at that and seen that it's reduced the bacterial load in the nest.
Talking of blue tits, I mean, as you can see, there's been a lot of good news over the weekend and so many of our nests have been doing well, but there is a little bit of drama and it is with the blue tits. So let's have a look at live at the nest, which is in the nest box, and you can see that there is just one chick left. Started with 8 chicks, one by one. They unfortunately didn't make it, they perished. They've cleaned all those dead bodies out of the nest box now, and there's just one chick remaining. I can tell you it is being fed. We've seen some pretty juicy caterpillars come in, and the feathers are beginning to show. We've seen it flapping its wings, and I'm really hopeful. I think it's looking good. It's looking good.
It's looking good.
It is. I'm really hopeful, just like I am with the Dartford warblers. It's looking good. That one little remaining chick out of 8 is going to survive. I'm just sure of it.
It'd be good if it would survive, but I don't think it's
going to fledge. It's going to fledge.
No, it's not looking big and robust. It's really behind in its development. Come on.
Come on.
OK, that's enough of the nest down here in the south of England. Let's head north now to Megan. Last week she was on the beautiful Isle of Bute. Now she's on the Bonnie Banks.
It certainly is bonny over here in the region of Loch Lomond. You can see Ben Lomond behind me and the Dew Loch in here, a smaller loch, but equally as beautiful. And we're here for a really precise region. Loch Lomond has got so many habitats that surround it, making it a really fascinating place. The loch itself is the largest loch by surface area with 27.4 square miles and the 3rd deepest. So if you stacked 2 Statue of Liberties on top of each other, well, then you get to the surface of Loch Lomond. And all the biodiversity that lives around here make it a really interesting site for the Scottish Centre of Ecology and the Natural Environment, run by the University of Glasgow and open since 1946. It really is a wonderful place and we've been enjoying our time so much. And of course, one of the reasons that the Research Centre is so perfectly placed is that it can look under the water and see the diversity of fish life that goes on there. And I've got Phoebe joining me now. Hi, Phoebe.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm great, thanks. How are you?
Well, I'm very excited because this is a really cool bit of kit. It's a remote operated vehicle, so like a submarine, is that right?
Kind of, yeah. So it allows us to see under the water, whether that's seeing fish behaviour or looking at the habitat.
Yeah, we popped it in earlier, but we've got a live camera, haven't we, where we can kind of see any fish that go past. And we have seen some, haven't we? We've had a few different things. Can I have a go?
Yeah, of course.
So excited. Okay, let's have a go. So if I tilt it, I can go down. Oh no, that's the wrong way. Let me go up. I'm a novice at this. We have seen something recently, haven't we? Let's have a little look at what we saw earlier. So what we can see is something in the distance. Some sort of worm on the bottom. Oh no, that's the eel. Is that the eel? Look at that.
They've got footage of
We've
the eel.
got an eel. Oh, that was only just a few minutes ago, wasn't
it was right before we started.
Well, it goes to show the importance of tech like this, really learning about these kind of sensitive ecosystems.
That's right.
Okay, well, I'll leave you to do your monitoring because I know this is part of your research project. Thank you so much, Phoebe. Very cool, I love that. Now there's lots of different species which make their home under the water of Loch Lomond, 26 fish species to be precise. You've got things like rainbow trout. Now they're not necessarily native, but I do think they're rather beautiful. Then you've got things like stickleback, which are small, only about 4 to 7 centimetres long, and the larger pike with that pronounced mouth, and they can reach up to 1 metre in length when they're fully grown and sexually mature. They're kind of a giant of the loch ecosystem. But there is another reason I am here today, and it's because of a true rarity. It's endemic to only 2 lochs in all of Scotland, Loch Lomond being one of them, and that is the Powan. Now the Powan is a glacial relic, which means that at the time of the last glacier there were many more of them, and now very few remain. They are incredibly rare, about 30 to 35 centimetres long. They like cool environments, high oxygen content, and they've been remaining at a relatively low population density, but it has been stable for a while, or at least it was until the 1980s when ruff got introduced. Now, ruff is a non-native species. They were introduced because they were used as live bait for fishing. Now, I'm pleased to say that using live bait is now illegal here in Scotland. But the ruff have had their impact because they eat the eggs of the Powan, which is a big problem for this sensitive species. Now, when we look at the food chart for this animal before the ruff was introduced, what you can see is you've got the top predators, so you've got pike, you've got otter and heron, and these would feed on things naturally like the Powan and roach. But when ruff got introduced, something interesting happened. So you've still got the top predators up the top and you've got ruff in the middle. Now these smaller arrows here are the previous historic pathways of what the top predators used to eat, and they still do a little bit. But the predators have been changing their strategy because found in 69% of otter spraint is ruff remains, to show that they're changing their diet depending on the availability of fish, which is quite interesting. Now, of course, it's not the solution. Having otters prefer to eat ruff isn't just a quick fix. There's still a lot of research that needs to be done in order to protect the Powan, such a rare and beautiful fish. Now it's time to head up north to get a bit of insight into the most beautiful secret relationships of the red-throated diver.
The Shetland Isles, our most northerly landmass. At first glance, deserted. But then, a voice. Carried on the wind. A sound once thought to herald the arrival of wet weather. The call of the rain goose, better known as the red-throated diver. Usually a seafaring bird, in spring, when it's time to find a partner, they come ashore to these small sheltered freshwater lochs. Like awkward teenagers, unable to look each other in the eye, they adopt a bashful approach when looking to attract a mate. Gaining in confidence as they call to one another. Before performing a wonderfully synchronized display. Whilst they may be agile and dexterous on the water, the final act on dry land isn't quite so graceful. With their legs positioned to the far back of their bodies, they're perfectly proportioned for diving for food, but not so perfect when climbing onto a muddy bank or onto a mate. A moment, all over in the blink of an eye. 4 weeks pass, and after a rather wet start, Shetland spring is finally in full swing. And the loch has 2 new residents. The chicks are born precocial, meaning they're up and about and swimming with their parents within 24 hours of hatching. But they're not yet able to feed themselves. The adults prefer to hunt out at sea, which means leaving the chicks with one parent on childcare duties. Here, the red-throated diver lives up to its name, to provide a fresh fish delivery service for the chicks. But on returning, there's only one chick visible. Great skewers patrol the barren grasslands and would make an easy meal of any chicks they find. The parents call out. But there's no response. Anxious minutes pass before, out of the grasses, the young chick appears. Reunited, the youngster is ready to be fed. And it won't be long before these chicks will head out to sea for adventures of their own. Red-throated diver in summer plumage, Shetland Islands, what a bird and what a place. And what a place I've got for you here. Welcome to Martin Down National Nature Reserve. 350 hectares of wildlife paradise. Now this chalk downland is a remnant of a once ancient landscape that covered much of this part of England. Its wildflower meadows are renowned and it's a crucial habitat for birds. The cuckoo's been cuckooing all day here. You get about half of the UK's butterflies here too. It's one of the best places in the whole country for butterflies, and that includes 6 of the blue species. And some of the flowers here, well, it's mind-blowing. It is a truly colourful, truly amazing place. And it's made possible for several reasons, but one of the crucial ones is this. It's nutrient-poor chalk soils. It's lacking in a lot of the essential ingredients that plants need to grow. Nitrogen, potassium, and what that means is that the plants grow slowly. Not one plant or not one group of plants dominate, and that encourages the wide variety of flowering plants that we see here. Now, it's particularly good for orchids. Earlier on, I saw 2 orchid enthusiasts who'd come all the way down from North Yorkshire to enjoy them. They have around 8 species here, and that includes this beautifully marked, delicate little orchid here. That is the common spotted orchid. Isn't that lovely? Look at that, common orchid here. But we also have a very rare orchid here too, and that is called the burnt tip orchid. And if you look at this, you'll see exactly why it's called that. You see the top of the stalk there looks like it's been charred, dark tip to the petals. They have up to 70 flowers on one plant, although 30 to 40 is more usual. And the smallest of the native orchids there, the flowers are very small, and although it doesn't produce nectar, it has a lovely, slightly sort of honey smell to it. Now, our orchids produce very small seeds. They're often called dust seeds, and that's so they're carried hundreds of miles on the wind. But there's a disadvantage to that too, because in that seed package, they're unable to carry enough nutrients to germinate. But orchids have recruited a hidden ally, fungi. Under the ground here, there's a whole network, a whole superhighway of fungal mycelium. Let me show you how it all works. This is the burnt tip orchid. This is the seed, or the dust seed, enlarged of course. Once it hits the soil, it's sought out by a fungus. They then bind together, and the seed can steal the nutrients, the sugars it needs from the mycorrhizal fungus here, and then it'll produce a protocorm, a kind of a bulb that's still hidden underground, and then packed full of nutrients, and then that will thrust up as a burnt tip orchid spike once more. They used to think that this whole process took up to about 15 years, but they've now discovered that it takes 3 years. You might think that that is a long, long time, but for an orchid, it's not. It's actually remarkably fast. Now, the burnt tip, as I say, is very scarce. Unfortunately, we've lost a lot of our chalk downland. We've lost a lot of our hay meadows. And since the late 1930s, we've actually lost 97% of our hay meadows here in the UK. I remember as a young lad helping the local farmers to gather in the hay. It's all gone over to silage now. And of course, hay meadows need to be managed. They need to be grazed, but they need to be grazed very lightly, because if you overgraze, you lose all of your scarce plants. If you undergraze, then the scrub takes over. If you plough it, reseed it, fertilise it, you lose absolutely everything. Thankfully, the wardens and the rangers here have got the management just right. And Chris and Michaela, I don't know if you've ever been up here, but I have to tell you, I've never heard so many skylarks in my whole life. They're singing all around me.
Wow.
I've got to tell you, Yolo, Martin Down is one of my favourite ever places. I fell in love with it as a teenager. I used to go up there to see Montague's Harriers. And in fact, I went there on my 21st birthday. I dragged my mum and dad, my sister and her boyfriend, and my girlfriend of the time, Joanne, and we went up there on May the 4th in the freezing cold, and we saw stone curlews displaying. What about that?
Oh, that is really charming for your 21st.
It was.
My 21st was a party in a nightclub in London.
Speaks volumes, speaks volumes. No more comment.
Listen, I've got something really interesting to show you, really interesting. And when I show you it in my hand, you'll think, what is she talking about? Because that just looks like a little piece of vegetation, doesn't it? But we've been finding these all over the reserve, and they're all sorts of different shapes, different patterns. We've been finding them in very different places. And I can tell you it's not just a piece of vegetation. It's something way more interesting. It's really fascinating. And this is one that's actually alive. And I don't know if you can see that end of it.
Look there, look.
You can see something is moving.
The head's out.
Well, these are bagworm caterpillars inside there, the caterpillar form of a bagworm moth. Look at this. You can see there's the caterpillar and it's dragging behind it the bag, which is why it's called a bagworm. It's this sort of encasement, and it's got leaves and stems, and with this one's got some heather flowers on it. I mean, it looks absolutely mad, doesn't it? And when it's ready, it starts to climb upwards. When it's ready to metamorphose, it climbs upwards and then it sticks itself to something, and then it pupates within the case. And that's when things get really interesting.
Fascinating, aren't they?
Oh, they're amazing.
They're like a
Who would have thought that was
terrestrial
alive?
caddisfly. They've got that for protection, obviously, and also for camouflage. But look, come over here, because they pupate inside the case, and clearly they will emerge as a male and a female. Let's take a look at the males first, and we've got a lovely model of one of the males here. So, to all intents and purposes, this looks like a pretty standard, what we call micro moth. It's got the wings, abdomen here, it's got the feathery antennae. Take a look at a real one here, and there you can see it. Those feathery antennae are really important. The males, if you remember, need to be super sensitive to pheromones, chemical cues that are given off by the females to attract the males. What about the female? Well, the female mates while she is still inside the case. So she emerges from her pupal case while she's still inside that vegetable case. Okay, then the male has to mate with her. Take a look at this. This is a male mating, and he's mating through the case. The female doesn't emerge. Now, what's interesting about the male is that he has a flexible, inflatable abdomen which is able to stretch out like this. And that means that he's able to mate with the female either through the top of the case, like this, stretching his abdomen. On this one needs to be a little bit more stretchy. Stretching, oh, sorry, mate. I mean, that might be quite painful. But stretching his abdomen all the way down to the reproductive organs of the female down here, or on occasion, he may punch through the bottom of the case. And just before we went live, we were looking into a little container we had with our bagworms, and we saw this. Out of nowhere, look, a male bagworm moth had arrived and it was mating through the bottom using its inflated abdomen to mate with the female. What about that?
These are mad, aren't they? It gets even madder, it really does. Because, so you've got the female in there, and then the eggs, if I take this off, develop inside her. And then it's thought that she comes out of this, of the case, and then she'll wriggle and writhe around like a maggot. And the reason she does that is to attract a bird to come down and eat her. So the bird, which seems crazy, doesn't it? So the bird eats her and then will poo out the half-eaten maggot, but the eggs are still inside her. They will hatch and live on. So basically, by the bird eating her, it disperses the eggs. Isn't that incredible?
It is incredible. However, we have to put a caveat in here. There are a number of people researching this. Lucy Agas is researching it, a guy called Phil Sterling and John Waters, and they do have contrasting ideas, so more observation needs to be done, because sometimes, as I say, they can mate through the base of the case, and sometimes the female will pupate head down, in which case she can't ever emerge from that case. And it's thought then that the eggs hatch, the female dies, they feed on her whilst they're growing, and then to disperse, they don't use birds, and through that process of going into the bird's mouth and coming out in its feces, they disperse using ballooning. Now, these are spiders. I know these are not caterpillars, but the technique is exactly the same. They spin a thin thread of silk sufficiently long that it can catch the air and act like a kite, and that will move them from one part of the environment to the other. So they are an extraordinary group of moths, 17 species in the UK, successful all over the world. But even now, the most exciting thing about them is we don't really know what's going on. That's going to take more research.
I'll tell you, every day's a school day, isn't it? Because not even you knew very much about
No.
this before today, did you?
No, I'd seen them, I'd looked them up, and when I'd found them glued to the side of my house, and I knew they were called bagworms, and I should have read on. I didn't. And now I've learned this much about them, but knowing there's still more to learn. I mean, I love that, though. The extendable, the inflatable
Fantastic.
abdomen.
Crazy creatures,
Just so
crazy
good, isn't it?
creatures. Just goes to show how incredible nature can be. Now, if you were growing up in the 90s, you may have been watching Chris and I present a programme called The Really Wild Show. And in those days, back then, that was how kids got their fix, their wildlife fix, and got sort of, engaged with wildlife. Of course, nowadays, it's all about social media. So we really need to have influences that get those kids and engage them with the natural world. And there are some fabulous ones that you can get on TikTok and Instagram and things. Lyra Valencia is one of them. She's an amazing young woman who is a warden at a reserve in Walthamstow.
What's up, everyone? Hope you're good. I'm back at work today at Walthamstow Wetlands, and oh my goodness, it is teeming with life. Spring is finally here. You see kingfishers, there's swans just here, grey-leg geese, there's butterflies everywhere as well, and the bees are out. I'm super excited for today. So about 2 years ago, I started using social media to show my friends and family what I do at work. I think it gained a lot of momentum because I'm so enthusiastic about everything I see. Found a spider. Oh my God, it's eaten a wasp. It's mad. I was born and raised in Croydon, South London. I come from a refugee background. My parents came here from South America. I think people are really surprised when they see someone like me talking about wildlife.
This song thrush right now is going ham.
It seems like a contradiction trying to connect people to nature through social media, but in fact, it's such a powerful tool.
Let me tell you something about pigeons, yeah? They're super loving. In fact, they also pair for life. Give respect to the pigeons.
I definitely get people who doubt my knowledge in wildlife. I don't think a lot of people even know that I have a degree in zoology. But I think it's just a misconception that young people or people from a low socioeconomic background or that sound like me or look like me don't know much about nature, but we do.
So this is a poplar hawk moth. Really beautiful moth. It looks like it has shoulder pads to be.
I'm one of the rangers here at Walthamstow Wetlands. My role is essentially just connecting people to wildlife, visitor engagement, getting people excited about nature. I think people will be really surprised by how biodiverse a site like this can be with so much urbanness around it. Yet, nature perseveres. You can see a pair of Egyptian geese with kind of like brown eyeshadow around their eyes. They're actually ornamental geese, so they're not native to here. They're just brought over to look good, really. I can also see tufted duck in the distance, which is also a treat to see. Really lovely diving ducks. I used to just overlook them and used to think they all look the same. But once I started birding, I realised there are so many different types of ducks. There's just something everywhere you look. A lot of these birds here that you can see have just come to this site specifically to breed for spring. Love is in the air. They're so cute. There's cormorant flying over, look. They're social nesters, so they like to nest in colonies. And you can see that here. You can see how close the nests are together, literally on top of each other. You can see how the floor is stripped bare. And that's because their guano is so acidic, it just kind of kills everything that's underneath. And that sounds bad, but this is just natural. They breed, they poo. It's just a cycle of life. You can see a grey heron. It's huge. Their wingspans are actually about 6 foot. It's bigger than me. Grey herons are a really good example of urban wildlife, and wildlife that's just easily overlooked because you can spot them at your local pond or in a river.
And we're lucky enough to have our own breeding colony here at the reserve. Today, I'll be joining licence ringer Paul Roper and the team as we venture to Heron Island to ring any chicks we can find. The population here has been in decline, so by doing this, we can keep track of their movements and learn more about their distribution.
herons, I feel like they look a little bit grumpy, but that's really not their personality. They're just magical. This will be my second time doing heron ringing.
So Caroline, you've got 96.
Okay. I'm so excited we've managed to find 3 herons. It feels so nice to have it in my hand. We think they're about a few weeks old, so now we're going to ring them. Paul's going to help me ring mine.
Then we're going to put this metal ring, so the numbers are facing up. Squeeze it till they touch, and these are very, very hard rings.
They are.
So you may struggle to close these.
I forgot to do my press-ups this morning.
So that's it, so that's touched, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it goes round and round,
Nice.
and up and down the leg.
They won't even feel it.
Just like wearing a wristwatch.
Yeah, perfect. All blinked up.
If you don't believe that birds came from dinosaurs, then
Look at that.
look at the baby herons.
Yeah.
And they're all ringed, all colour ringed up, so they're ready to go back in the nest.
Getting so close to these beautiful beings feels like an honour. If you know where to look, there's a lot of wildlife that can be found. I think urban communities find it really difficult on knowing how to connect with nature. I mean, that's why I love my job, because especially in the city, a lot of people can be quite disconnected. It comes down to not even knowing that these type of spaces exist in the heart of London. I hope for me that we see people who care more about nature. I think it's like take the focus off wildlife and more people connected to wildlife, because then that will benefit both.
What an inspirational individual Lyra is, using social media to educate people about wildlife, especially the importance of urban wildlife, but also, I think, appealing to a different audience, a younger audience. Welcome back to Martin Down National Nature Reserve. Now, earlier on, I emphasised the importance of this area for wildflowers, especially orchids, and for invertebrates, especially butterflies. But it's also vitally important for a whole host of other wildlife too. Now, mammals, lots of mammals here. Brown hares are common. They love the open areas where they can graze, and then the hidden areas, the taller vegetation. Roe deer here as well. They'll feed in the open pastures, blackbirds gathering insects to feed its chicks, but more than anything else, skylarks. This place is absolutely buzzing with skylarks, flying up into the sky, sometimes hundreds of meters, singing constantly. And I spoke to one of the rangers here, and they survey every year, carrying out transects. They walk the same line year in, year out. And this year, on one of them, they actually counted over 131 individual skylarks. Honestly, more skylarks here than I've ever heard anywhere else, ever. It's a fantastic, fantastic place. But unfortunately, a lot of our farmland birds are in steep decline, and that includes 2 species that are found here. They're 2 buntings, the yellowhammer and the corn bunting. So look at the yellowhammer first of all. Beautiful bird. Anyone my age or older will remember yellowhammers being common birds. Canary, yellow face there. I grew up around Lake Vyrnwy, they were everywhere. The corn bunting, well, common in lowland areas really, not so common in the upland areas that I remember. They used to call them the fat old bird of the barley, so it's often associated with low intensity arable farmland. But corn buntings have declined markedly. They've declined by 83% between 1967 and 2020. It's all very well me throwing facts and figures at you, but consider this. In 1967, for every 100 corn buntings we had, we've lost 87 of those. So we only have 13 remaining now. The farmers here, however, are not going to take all of that lying down. They've formed a kind of super cluster. They've all come together. Let me show you over here. Here we have Martin Down National Nature Reserve, is that pink bit there. The super cluster involving 45 farmers and covering 91 square miles, but I'm going to concentrate on this blue area. That is the Martin Down Super cluster there, that is 21 square miles and involves 15 farmers. What they did was in 2017, they got the experts in to carry out a baseline survey. In other words, they recorded all the plants that were here, all the birds, all the invertebrates, all of the mammals, and then they undertook the work. They took advantage of all the grants and they planted hedgerows, they scraped out ponds, they let wide verges to every field, encouraged wildflowers there, they put up nest boxes, and the results have been mind-blowing. Corn buntings have increased here by 125%. Grey partridge numbers have increased. Barn owls are producing more young than they did before. They've even seen an increase in the number of hedgehogs here. So all of you farmers, thank you very much. I salute you. And Chris, isn't it brilliant to hear about farmers that have come together, that are undertaking positive action for wildlife whilst farming the land, making a living, but making a big, big difference.
Fantastic, Yolo. I mean, it sends a really clear message out to all of those other farmers that we have the capacity to do that. Farm wildlife, farm food, feed people, and have a sustainable landscape. Top work. I'm back here in Mission Control. I'm in that van where all of the wires lead from all of those cameras, and here you can see all of the screens that display all of the nests that we've got at the moment. Now, Sarah, what are we going to go to first?
I think we should go to the kestrel chicks. We last saw them Friday, and as you can see, they've changed quite a lot since then. Their feathers are starting to come through. There are 5 there. You can't quite see them. There's one more buried in the back there. But they've been spending a lot of time in the front of the nest box today in anticipation for food. They're starting to get a bit territorial over food, sort of mantling and things like that. But yes, you can see that their feathers are coming through really nicely. I think they look rather majestically messy.
Majestically messy. I'll live with that. They're absolutely fantastic, those young kestrels. Joe Charlesworth over here. Joe, what have we got? We go live to the oyster catcher.
Look at the oyster catcher.
There, look at that.
It's been quite sedate.
It is sedate. It's been very sedate. We've been watching it for 19 days of it being sedate. And of course, they normally hatch after 24 to 27 days, so keeping our eyes peeled on that, using those cameras that are on from 7 till 10 would be a good idea. Now, both of the adults have been quite dutiful when it comes to the duties of incubating. They come back in at regular intervals, a bit impatient, they'll push the others off. We have seen intruders, if you like, down on the beach. Here, one of the adults immediately gets up and leaves. That's because of the presence of a seeker deer. Is that a threat? Well, trampling, I suppose. In other parts of the UK, we have seen roe deer eating the eggs of woodlark, so it might happen, but the deer makes an exit. But then look at this. Just last night, the oyster catcher adult gets up, doesn't scream, slinks away quietly. Sometime afterwards, we spotted this, the foot of a fox. A fox is standing virtually on top of that nest. It doesn't eat the eggs. It sniffs and then moves on and disappears down the beach. And then, relatively quickly afterwards, once it's gone, one of the adult oyster catchers comes back in and settles down. What on earth is going on here? How can an animal with the nose of a fox not have sniffed that nest? Well, if you were watching last week, you'll know that Megan recorded the fact that some of these wading birds change their scent whilst they're incubating the eggs. So the adult has a different or not a smell. But clearly, in the absence of those, the eggs can't carry an odour either. Otherwise, the fox surely would have found them. Joe, I tell you what, we've got another nest that we'd like to have a look at. It's our reed warblers. First chance for us to look at this nest. Beautifully situated there, strung up in the reeds, above the water, woven together. Grass and spiders' webs. You can just see the chicks in the top there. But we have been watching these already, and there's been a lot of activity. Both adults have been coming in, feeding the chicks. They're insectivores, of course. They come all the way from sub-Saharan Africa to feed on a crop of insects in these reed beds throughout the course of our summer. absolutely sensational nest. They can be parasitised by cuckoos, but there aren't that many reed warblers here, so we don't suspect that the cuckoos will be coming to them. The cup's very deep, as you can see here. The adults, whilst they're brooding, sink right down into it, and they're bringing in a wide range of invertebrate prey, not just insects, but plenty of spiders as well. Look at that, absolutely sensational stuff. And there we go, settling down on top of that nest. Now, to find all of these nests requires some expertise. It's an art, there's no doubt about that, but you have to be very sensitive. In fact, some of these nests here, you need a special licence to look at. But that shouldn't stop us investigating the biology of breeding birds, because if we don't understand that, we won't be able to conserve them. The British Trust for Fauna Quality are very keen that we take an interest and count the eggs and young. Jack Badams has been out to give us a crash course on how to find nests without disturbing them.
Nesting, the art of finding nests. Important for Springwatch, but also for science when it comes to understanding how breeding birds are faring. So, when we're spying into nests, what do we have to bear in mind? First of all, it's worth remembering that a surprising number of species actually nest on, or very close to, the ground. So be careful where you're putting your feet when you're walking around and how you're brushing through the vegetation, so you don't accidentally damage any of them. Once you've got a nest, make sure you take the minimum amount of time counting those eggs and chicks before you're out of there. Oh, and of course, make sure you leave the vegetation exactly as you found it, so you're not making it any easier for predators. Bad weather is no good for nesting. If it's raining or cold, then parent birds will spend longer on their eggs or their chicks, keeping them warm, so you're best off just leaving them be. If you can, look at your nests from far away first. If there's a parent on there that you might disturb, or big chicks that might jump out, then don't risk it. By following the code of conduct, we're able to peer into the lives of the birds around us without causing them any harm. Like this great tit nest in here.
Going out and looking for nests really highlights that childlike curiosity, that excitement when you see something as delicate and beautiful as that. But we have to do so with the utmost respect for the animal, with their welfare at top priority. And if you'd like to help with citizen science by monitoring nests, you can go to the BTO Nest Monitoring Scheme, and all the details to that are on our website. Now, speaking of birds, I've made my way to the woodland and I'm hearing a cacophony of glorious birdsong, and there are so many different species that make their home here around the woods in Loch Lomond. You've got, of course, all the usual suspects. You've got things like blue tits, which this one looks a little bit scraggly. I'm not sure what's going on with this blue tit. But other things including redstart, this beautiful male as well. Seeing it hunt on the floor there, and song thrush, the loudest, of course, sometimes in the morning, but seeing the mate getting that intricate detail into their behaviour is lovely. And my personal favourite, the flycatcher, able to go directly up the trees like this, and pied flycatcher there too. Now, of course, we have to really look, of course, at how these bird species are changing over time. And what's happening here at SEEN, at this research centre, is they're trying to understand urbanisation on some of our favourite bird species. So they've set up a transect that goes all the way from the centre of Glasgow, all the way around, just about 25 miles long, to the northeast of Loch Lomond. I'm trying to get the midges out of everywhere. They are surrounding me right now. But the scientists here were looking at nest boxes, but also about light pollution, the number of people around these particular sites, light pollution, everything like that. And joining me now, well, we have two very special guests, in all honesty. We've got Dr. Claire Branston. Hello, Claire.
Hello.
So you're from the University of Glasgow, but I'm so excited.
We have a very special guest here.
We've got a male redstart.
This is a male redstart that we've just caught. So these breed in our nest boxes, as you just mentioned.
Yeah.
And as part of the monitoring, what we do is we put on these metal rings, which are from the BTO. And they're a bit like a car registration number, so we're kind of giving this bird a name, which is really cool, because it means now that if we catch this bird again, we know how old it is, we know where it was, and this is obviously a migratory species.
You're ringing it there. I mean, it's so important, isn't it, to understand, and it is important to mention this bird has literally just been caught, and you have a specific licence
I do, yes. So I've been training for a long, long time.
And how does monitoring birds like this gorgeous redstart, help with your study about urbanisation impacts?
Yeah, so it's really cool. So here, as you mentioned, we've got this gradient. So this is the forest site. This is where these birds evolve. So that's their kind of natural kind of behaviour, and their breeding success is what we would expect. But that means we can compare it to the urban environment and see how that might be differing, or changes that might be occurring.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I'm going to leave you with this glorious redstart. I can't believe you've got a redstart. Oh my gosh. To make sure he's released safely, and talk to you a little bit about some of Claire's results, because they are really fascinating. So she looked at great tit and blue tit differences in rural and urban environments. And if we look at rural first, you've got the emergence of Lepidoptera caterpillars, so butterfly and moth caterpillars that come out at the start of spring. Then you've got the great tits and blue tits, which time their breeding at the same time as the emergence of this really important food source. But in urban environments where it is hotter, in Glasgow it's between 4 and 6 degrees Celsius hotter than the countryside, you have a slight shift in these cues. So the caterpillars emerge a lot earlier, and the breeding changes. So blue tits perhaps are less sensitive to environmental change, and they kind of miss out on the early emergence of the caterpillars, whereas the great tit is able to shift its breeding and move forward to the caterpillars. And there's two thoughts about this. Either the blue tits are more sensitive, or perhaps the great tit, as a bigger bird, is out-competing for those early nest sites, so the blue tit sadly doesn't get a look in. Now, all this research is, of course, incredibly important as our cities expand, as our population expands. We've got to know how we're impacting our wildlife around us. Now, I think it's time we go down to Arn, down south, because if I stand here any longer, there is a chance that I might be eaten alive by midges. They're everywhere. Oh, goodness.
Well, we were complaining about the midges here, but I think we have to defer to Megs because she clearly has a larger number of those biting insects. Interesting stuff with those tits, though, but of course it's not just our warmth in the cities, it's now our entire planet that's warming up, and that will be shifting those breeding seasons, those caterpillar seasons, all around, and having a definite impact on the ecology of these birds.
These midges may be slightly irritating for us, making me scratch my head a lot, but of course there are birds that absolutely make the most of all these. And that's our new nest that I'm going to show you now, because we've never had this nest on the programme before on Springwatch. So it's new to Springwatch. There are all our different nests that we've got, and I'm going to take you to the sand martins. There we are, that's inside the sand martin nest. We've got 5 little chicks there, and as I say, we've never been able to put a camera in a sand martin nest before because they normally nest on cliffs, so we can't get behind the cliff. But if we have a look at where this nest is, it's actually an artificial bank, and you can see there's lots of holes in the bank, and those are the nests. And if we highlight one, you can see that's where we've got our camera. So that's where they go into it. As I say, it's an artificial bank, but it's exactly like it would be on a cliff face. And they go inside the little tunnel, into the nest, where those 5 chicks are. And these parents are doing a fantastic job so far at feeding them. And as I say, they'd feed on things like these little midges, tiny, tiny little flying insects that they will regurgitate and give to their chicks. Sometimes they even ball them up into something called a bolus, which would have hundreds of little insects in it, which they would feed. And they're
Great
doing
to see
well,
those.
seem to be doing well.
Yeah, really, really good. First time inside a sand martin's nest, which is fantastic. Last week, we introduced you to our robins. They're nesting in the barn that the RSPB use. We can cut to them live there now. They're alongside the long spades, as you can see. And there we are, that's it, they're live now. You can just see at the head of one of the birds there, they're already getting that very characteristic speckly plumage that young robins have. We've been watching them for a little while. Here they are. Adults have been out and about collecting lots of different insects. Unlike the sand martins, which are taking those very small flying insects, the robins are a lot less specialised. They're out in the fields, they're out in the hedgerow, they're out in the woods. Anything of the right size that they can catch and bring to their young, they will. We've seen them bringing in large moths. Here a dragonfly. That particular youngster hasn't got a taste for dragonflies, so the adult can't let it go to waste. It takes it away and gives it to one of its siblings that wolfs it down straight away. But they're great generalists, the robins. That's one of the reasons why they're so successful. But these youngsters have been very active. They've been jumping about. This one nearly falls out of the nest here. They've been wing flapping. So they are one of those nests that you should be keeping an eye on. Remember, you can watch them 7 till 10 every single day because fledging is on the cards with those young robins amongst the long spades.
It's another nest that I'm really hopeful for, because being in the shed with the long spades means that there's lots of people around and they should be better protected, you know. Well, that's what I hope anyway.
Fingers crossed,
that's
fingers
what
crossed.
I hope. Let's take a breather and enjoy the sights and sounds of spring on the river. That was beautiful, but it's really hard to be mindful when you're being bitten so much. They're really out tonight, aren't they? Goodness gracious. Should we have a quick look at one of our live nests? Because you loved it so much, the peregrine. Let's just take a final look at our peregrine, because it's in Corfe Castle. Absolutely stunning bird. We enjoyed it at the beginning. We're going to enjoy it at the end of the show. Look at that blue sky as well. Absolutely glorious.
That is the Queen of Purbeck. The Queen of Purbeck perched on her lofty mount. We're nearly out of time, but take a look at this. 13-year-old Josh Allen took this fabulous picture of an adult starling on the left, feeding the juvenile there on the right. Head right inside its mouth.
Can you imagine that? I mean, that really is, isn't it? Great photo, and great to get someone so young taking it as well. Well, that brings us almost to the end of the show. We'll, of course, be back tomorrow at 8 o'clock. What have we got coming up? We've got some exciting news, because our judges have judged. And so tomorrow we'll be announcing the winner of our Under-18s Wildlife Hero Awards.
And I'll be searching through the sediment on the shores of Loch Lomond looking for some aquatic invertebrates.
And I'll be uncovering the secret world of dormice in Garston Woods.
And as we've said several times this evening, remember you can watch those live nests from 7 in the morning until 10 at night. You can wake up with the watches. Do keep sending us in your images, your videos and your questions. We love receiving those. And stay tuned, because for the next half an hour you can listen to Jack Badams and Sarah Titcombe, who are in the Story Developers van talking about those live nests. You can find those over on the iPlayer now. We've got off to a cracking start tonight. What about those bagworm moths?
Oh,
absolutely
I love them.
Extraordinary.
Absolutely
and frankly, folks, you know what I'm going to say. That's what you pay your licence fee for. Oh.
You're enjoying the sunset.
Oh, I love
look
it.
at that.
You can explore some of our amazing and different species and the diverse habitats in which they live by ordering the Open University's free poster. To get your copy, call 0300 303 2465 or go to bbc.co.uk/Springwatch and then follow the links to the Open University.